The false theory of self-ownership.
Or in this moron's case, the true theory of self-Dumbership.
Right to liberty. That freedom itself derives from one's property right to oneself. This is profoundly false and disastrous.
Oh, it's so terrible that we own ourselves. Well, answer me this, Mr. T as in Tango. Do you mind if I punch you in the face? Because if you don't have ownership over yourself, you have no right to stop me from doing it. Only by having ownership do you have exclusivity, the right to decide what happens to your body and your life. And just so we're clear, I wouldn't really punch you in the face. I don't do stuff like that. I just shoot you from orbit with a 50 petawatt laser.
A certain sphere of action must be protected and respected if one is to survive, if one is to continue to exist.
If you're going to survive, you're going to need to protect your life. And to do that, you're going to need self-ownership.
Rights come from the fact that life is the ultimate standard of value. Everything flows from life.
How do you come to that conclusion? Most things in the universe don't flow from life, so you can't reach this point from first principles. First principles, logically derived and universally applied, lead us inevitably to self-ownership, because no other alternative follows the consistency principle.
Now the answer to this is liberty, freedom. People need to be free in order to act on their own judgment, in order to think and then act on the basis of that thought.
And how are they going to do that unless they own themselves? Ownership is about exercising exclusive control. In order to act on your own judgment, you have to be able to act against people preventing you from exercising that liberty. You need the right to self-defense. But for self-defense to be legitimate, your autonomy over your body and your life must be exclusive.
And this is the only way you can have rights. Rights are naturally bounded. Your rights end exactly where another person's begin.
Right, because they own themselves. You're arguing for self-ownership here, Dingleberry.
So the right to life comes first. Then you have the right to liberty, because thinking and acting on your own judgment is how you support your own life.
So they're really the same thing. You have the right to live and think and act. In other words, you have the right to exclusive control over your own self. In other words, self-ownership.
In fact, the more other people do things for you, the less alive you are. If people think for you, you will become an animal because you won't have to use abstract thought, so you won't get the higher emotional pleasures of life. And if people act for you, you won't even have the physical pleasures or pains.
It may sound weird that I'm not just skipping to the part where he disses on self-ownership, but I need to give him enough rope to hang himself. Everything he's saying here demands self-ownership and is impossible without it.
That's freedom. That's liberty. So life, liberty, and property. Why property? Because the right to liberty means nothing. The right to take action means nothing unless you have the right to the material consequences of that action.
See? He just keeps making the case for self-ownership. Very badly because he doesn't understand the principles or the logic underlying it, but everything he's presenting as truth is what self-ownership is.
Now, what the self-ownership people do is invert this hierarchy. They say no. Liberty is derived from property. You have a right to own things, including yourself, and therefore you have a right to do with yourself whatever you want.
Not quite. You start with self-ownership, and I just showed you how your explanation shows how life, liberty, and property derive automatically from that.
Well, there's a pretty big problem here, because if you say, okay, I have the right to liberty. All right, well, how do you justify that? Well, because I have the right to property. I have the right to own myself, and so I can do what I want with myself. Okay, why do you have the right to own yourself?
I'll link again to my video, Libertarianism and Property Rights from First Principles, which explains the answer step by step.
Where does property come from? no answer. It's just axiomatic. They can't ground it in anything.
Mr. Strawman, give me a break.
Now, if you have the correct view, the objectivist view, you say, oh, property? Well, that's just the right to the results of your action, which is the right to liberty. And the right to liberty, well, that comes from the right to life, because the right to life is the right to taking those actions that support your life. And life is just the basis of everything.
Except life isn't the basis of everything. Most things in the universe are not alive. So where's your first principles? Where's your axioms? How can you even begin to argue about self-ownership when A, you don't even know how it's derived, and B, you can't even derive your own philosophy from first principles?
That's the right to exist. You can't go any deeper than that.
Yes you can. The consistency principle, the law of non-contradiction, and even more basic than that, which I didn't go into in my video, the law of identity, which is that everything is identical to itself, the law of substitution, proof that existence exists, cogito ergo sum, and so on. There's a whole vast set of logic leading to the conclusion that the thinker not only exists, but is a sapient entity, and that the thinker can also infer that other people are sapient entities. Self-ownership comes from trying to figure out how sapient entities can interact with each other in accordance with the consistency principle. It's hilarious that this guy makes a series called Functional Philosophy and doesn't even understand these basic principles of philosophy.
Now, you can't do that if you believe in the false theory of self-ownership.
That's the only way you can do that.
You have to say liberty depends on property, and then property depends on no answer.
Just shut your pie hole, for goodness sake.
How do you justify the right to property? If you can't justify by liberty, you're justifying liberty by property. So you can't justify property by liberty, so where's property come from? God.
Are you just stupid, or have you been drinking? No one is convinced by this, what were you thinking?
Now this is a disaster. It sets up this system whereby the more you defend rationality, the more reason-oriented you are, the more you are attacking and tearing down rights.
I don't even know what this is supposed to mean. Self-ownership and the subsequent rights to life, liberty, and property are all derived from reason, a logical chain of deontological ethics derived from first principles, applied consistently and universally.
They don't actually believe that anything Kim Jong-un does violates rights. Rights are just a subjective, arbitrary postulate.
Straw man, I can't stand it when you spew it over and over again.
So the more rational you get, the further away from mysticism and supernaturalism you get, the less rights are respected.
How much can a person take? Mr. Strawman, give me a break.
You know, there's a reason. The less psychotically religious a conservative is, a Republican is, the more big government he is, and the smaller government he is, the more religious he is.
I can point you to a lot of libertarians who are atheists, and I have a whole series on how statists, particularly those on the left, make exactly the same logical fallacies as the religious.
There's a reason that all of the most religious people are the most capitalist, and it's because of this so-called esoteric philosophical issue of the hierarchy of rights.
Are we sure this is an actual person and not just a computer sticking random phrases together? I think I might get better philosophy out of the Deepak Chopra generator.
So this matters. If you don't understand what depends on what, then you get into this impossible situation we're in.
Yeah, I think you're talking about yourself there, Sunshine.
And it is all a result of getting the abstract philosophy wrong.
Except you didn't show that we're the ones getting it wrong. You didn't even try to argue against the logical underpinning of the principle of self-ownership. In fact, you pretended that we don't have one, and you also conflated it with divine rights, which is distinct from self-ownership. In other words, your entire case against self-ownership is strawman and equivocation.
And if you give a bad answer, as libertarians and conservatives have, well, guess what you get? You get the libertarians and conservatives we have today.
which he apparently thinks is a bad thing. But look around at the state of politics today and ask yourself, who's causing the most trouble, the most division? Who's stirring up the most violence, the most controversy, the most injustice? It certainly isn't the libertarians, and it's really not even the conservatives. It's almost always people on the left disrupting peaceful interactions between members of society, infringing on everything from freedom of speech, to innocent until proven guilty, to sexual freedoms women have fought for decades to win.
This is precisely the kind of thing you get when you don't know what you're talking about, which is just another way of saying when you're a libertarian. If you don't know the basis of property rights, well, then you say, these things have no basis, I guess, so imposing them on people is just an arbitrary kind of coercion, so we can make that up to people with taxation and actual force.
Yeah, libertarians argue for taxation. Right. If you can deny the basis of self-ownership, then this is what it comes to. Exercising basic property rights is seen as coercion, and so it's used to justify real coercion in an attempt to correct it.
This is the kind of nonsense you get from libertarians.
And this is the kind of arrogance you get from people who haven't even taken 15 minutes out of their miserable lives to find out what the philosophy they're arguing against actually says. Hey, thanks for watching. Please hit like and subscribe and keep these videos coming by donating, becoming a subscriber and getting special benefits, or even for free with airtime. And check out all the great content here, like this video selected just for you.